Curse of Shadows and Thorns. Chapter 8. Part 1. My plans to assert my status and command on Legan Gray faded by noonday. All morning I'd sought him out, an attempt to test him, see if he admitted he'd cornered Civ. If he confessed, well then, I'd certainly have something to say about it. What? I didn't know. But I would say something important, surely. Grand imagings of intimidation played in my head, the things I'd say, the tone I'd take. And by the time I arrived at the arched doorway of the wooden wattle cottage he'd occupied, I'd convinced myself Legan Gray would soon tremble beneath my ferociousness. With learned influence, I gave a heavy-handed knock at the door. The cottage was not large, enough to house a washroom, a bed for two, and a pantry of sorts, with a table to eat small meals. The knock would be heard at all corners of the cottage, and it would take even less time to reach the door. Stillness returned my summons. I knocked again with more frustration behind it. There were qualities of being raised in a royal household that reared up on occasion. Being kept waiting too long was one of them. I didn't like it, and grew rather ill-tempered when I was ignored. "Herr Gray!" I demanded. Nothing. Kivanna, the negotiator's not in. The gritty rasp came at my back. Tension gathered between my brows. "Where has he gone, Vigo?" The old man removed his woven cap off his stark white hair. His threadbare tunic had once been white, now with yellowed sweat soaked into the fabric. A musty wake typically announced Vigo before his voice. Skin like leather after turns in the sun, he leaned on the handle of a rusted gate spade and lit an herb roll. The folds of his rough skin stretched as he puffed out a plume of smoke. Parts of his agreement, last I heard, gets every last moon off. The last moon came every 20 nights. But I'd never heard of the agreement. Quite the opposite. I'd always been told negotiators rarely left the side of their charge. Why? I asked, though why would a servant know? It was foolish to underestimate a gossip like Vigo. The old man jabbed a spade into the small flower berm around Legan's cottage, teasing the soil. He puffed his dark smoke as he worked and talked. "Hal's the one who mentioned it. Went with him, and all. Don't know where to. Halvar is with him? How long will they be gone?" Another shrug, another dig with the spade. "Packed for at least the night. Him, Hal, and the stern fella. I saw them leave right after the sun rose. If I can say, your negotiator looked like he'd stumbled out of one of the hells. Red-eyed, staggering. Didn't look well is all I'm saying." Legan was ill? When I was meant to be angry at him, a pang of worry pierced instead. Vigo started a hum as he turned the soil. I thanked him and strode up the path to the manor. My confrontation would be turned to Civ, I supposed. She'd tell me what happened, and then when Legan recovered, I'd make him wish he was ill again. But how does one plan an illness? Vigo said he planned to take every last moon off. Was it coincidence he'd simply woken on his assigned day ill? Or was this ailment recurring, so Legan knew to expect it? My reluctant worry deepened. At the stoop of the house, my father climbed the steps, leaning over a wooden cane, a deep, unforgiving frown curling his lips. A prince consort through marriage, but in this moment, my father looked every bit as formidable as any king. "Mon Kivin, you look well today." I bowed my head. Proper greetings seemed prudent in this moment. He was angry or agitated at something. My first thoughts ran to the idea that he might know about our sparring nights. I prayed to every deity I could name that he didn't. Daughter, my father said airily, glad to see you up and about. I thought you might sleep until the moon. I'd hardly slept past dawn, but my father expected a punctual, early-to-rise household, as if without our presence the day would be utterly wasted. Forgive me, I overslept. There are some who seem to think you abandoned your chambers last night. My father leaned his ruddy face close to mine. Red eyes, pallid skin. Father, I do not speak, Elise, he hissed through his teeth, but it only caused a long cough. He cleared his throat when it passed, his voice hoarse. A woman in the throes of betrothal. He sniffed me. My face heated in fierce embarrassment when he pulled back, disgusted. Did you bet someone? My eyes widened. No, of course not. You are a wretched, selfish girl. I'd be surprised if any more offers are made. We ask little of you. If you wish me dead, then continue being the selfish child you are. Father, Get inside. He clicked his tongue, snarling. Herr Grey is absent for the day and tonight. You are not to be unaccompanied now that your hand is forbid, so you will remain with your sister until otherwise told. My heart sank. How would I get the truth out of Civ with Runa around? I knew enough not to argue, though. Head down, I hurried past my father and into the manor. He called me selfish. It broke my heart and angered my soul all at once. How could he say such a thing when I made no protest simply for the sake of his healing? This vow was in honor of him, for his life, and it was all he cared about. The main hall bustled with servants behind netted veils. Spices and roasting meat wafted through the corridors of the mid-meal. An ever-present hint of mold, spiced red, and sweat heated beneath the high sun. Smells of the home I'd soon leave behind. With the knowledge my negotiator may not be as kindly as thought, that my friend and servant might have secrets, that I was to meet with suitors without the looming presence of Legan. Even if I held some resentment toward him, I could not deny his intimidating figure put me at ease around pompous nobles. All of it struck me in the chest, hard and unrelenting. This would end sooner than later. I'd leave this behind and be forced to learn a new kind of life. Hot tears sprang to my eyes, a collision of anger and hopelessness as I climbed the steps, desperate to hide away in my chamber until I was forced to emerge. A giggle stopped me halfway up the wide-set staircase. Ellie! I leaned over the polished banister at Runa. My sister winked. What were you thinking? Being Valdecalder, Runa had her own maids, but they were of a different station. They were Ravenspire servitude now, and were not masked. In fact, their frocks were hemmed in silver and gold and emerald thread. Their dark hair braided in satin ribbons. They were the maids of the future queen, after all, and lifted their noses in the air as well as any royal. I suspected Runa didn't laugh well into the night with her maids, though I doubt they spoke much at all. With a stiff wave, I urged my sister to join me on the stairs, out of earshot of anyone listening. She glanced over her shoulder and obeyed, stifling a laugh as she did. Ellie, did you truly sneak out? Why the risk? Her remarks answered two lingering questions. No one knew I'd gone to spar last night, and someone had spied my escape and had a rather big mouth. Runa linked her elbow with mine and walked me up the remaining steps. Well? She pressed when I didn't answer. I needed air. I lied. It's suffocating in here. What a bleeding weakling you are, sister. So like our father. Runa snorted, a bit like the hogs kept in the pens outside. But then Runa's voice often came through her nose rather than her throat. In truth, I think she did it on purpose. as though the higher pitch made her sound more important, smoother around the edges, unlike folk in the townships. I thought it made her more like someone always trying to draw in breath, but never succeeding. The nasally whistled pitch heightened as my sister went on. You felt suffocated because men are seeking your hand, because you are the bright star for the moment. Cursed gods, what more can be done for you? I expect nothing to be done for me, but to be allowed to live as I wish. We turned down the upper corridor in the direction of Runa's chambers. I didn't argue, even when her maids whispered about my unkempt braid. Her chambers were larger and more secluded. Did you truly have every desire to vow with Calder? Or was there ever a thought that perhaps someone else might make you happy, might love you? Runa lifted a brow like I'd suggested pure insanity. She didn't answer right away and opened the door to her personal study, or tea room, mostly. My sister had a taste for exotic teas and would surely cost Calder a small fortune, importing the dark herbs and sweet flowers from the distant kingdoms. Dismissing her maids to sit in the corner, she lifted a silver bowl to her nose and inhaled. Adding a few leaves to a cup, she sat on an upholstered chair with a sigh. Ellie, I have no idea what you expect me to say. Calder is the finest match in the kingdom. The future king. What could possibly be better? But you don't love him. She balked and added a touch of honey to her cup. What good is love in a monarchy? We feel each other's ambition, the drive to rule Timorin better than the generations before us. I sat on the twin chair across from my sister, choosing to nibble at one of the saffron cakes on the tray rather than take the pungent tea. Zybin will rule for turns to come. I see more benefit in an affectionate match than one fed by ambition to take the throne, when the day won't come to pass until your face is drooping. I knew how to get under my sister's skin, and I took a bit of pride in the glare she cut at me. Mention of her youth and beauty dying someday always gave Runa a puckered look. How little you know! Your lack of interest in the growth of our kingdom is disappointing. You'd rather spend your days in books of fairy tales, or laughing with your mates who are friendly to you out of fear you'll slit their gullet if they are not. She might as well have slapped me. I looked at the half-eaten roll in my hand, worried she might be partly right. Would Mavie and Civ ever be their true selves with me? Or was it partly because of my status and they felt obligated to be courteous? Runa groaned. She returned her teacup to the tray. I'm sorry, Ellie, but you and I were not meant to have friends or romantic love. We are made to lead Timorin into glory, into power, like the gods battled before us. There was no sense in arguing with her. I lifted my gaze to the table near her hearth. Scrolls of vellum and parchment were pinned back by books and ceramic carvings of the goddesses of fate. What are you studying over here? Runa brightened. Oh, you might find this interesting. Since I am to move into the palace after my wedding, I thought it would be wise to fully understand the history of Ravenspire. However, the palace goes far beyond our family. I'm learning of the cursed royals, the last Eaton bloodline our great-grandfather destroyed. Really, she wasn't wrong. I was intrigued to learn more of the Eaton royalty. I knew a little of the rulers before us, but after nearly 100 turns, some stories had become more like lore than fact. Have a look,